Cool. So should I just give it a minute or so before we start?
Yeah, just if you look at the participants, you'll start seeing the numbers increase.
Yeah, cool. No worries. All right, maybe we'll give it one more minute. Cool.
I think you're good to go, Lewis.
All right, great. Hi, everyone. My name is Lewis. I've been working, helping run the PISP workstream for the last little while. I think it's actually been over a year now. We've got a little look back in time in just a second. But I'm going to be sharing with you today about the PISP workstream. We've kind of been changing names a little bit, becoming a little more business friendly. So PISP / 3PPI, third party payment initiation / overlay services, kind of perhaps zooming out a little bit on the scope. And that kind of alludes to a point that I'll be making in shortly around what it is that this workstream is focused on and is doing. So I kind of quickly want to touch on, what PISP is. We've talked about this a lot. So if you need some more context, there's plenty of other slides, so I don't want to talk too much about it. But really the idea is that we want to allow, this is my looking back, but I'll come back to looking back in a second. We wanted to deliver this overlay services API, allowing for third-party sorts of participants, such as fintechs, to engage directly with Emoji Switch to deliver services to their customers. Now, we're starting with the idea of a peer-to-peer payment using a strong form of user authentication called FIDO. But we're hoping that this is going to grow over time. So this is kind of the first instance of a non-fund holding participant, a non-DFSP, a new type of participant interacting directly with the switch and injecting transactions straight into a Emoji Switch. We've come a long way. So it was a year and a half ago that Google came along and presented this concept and their first white paper on it. From there, we've done a lot of work around designs and documents and gone around in a lot of circles. And eventually we decided that really this use case deserved its own API. And there was a restructure of the change control board, which is the body in the Emoji organization that is in charge of the APIs. We then also went ahead and got the first linking use case implemented, so we could prove, yes, this is how linking works between a PISP and a DFSP, and this is what it looks like. We've kind of in the subsequent months, October to April, been continuing on our use case implementation journey and building out some of our demos to make it kind of real in many ways to a lot of people. And today, what I'm kind of going to be presenting is our latest update, which is really just an incremental update. I probably don't have too much to share today other than to kind of look at where we've come from, where we're at the moment, and what the future is for this work stream and for this feature as part of Emoji Loop. So really the main deliverable that we're talking about today is we've got the end-to-end transfers and we've got end-to-end linking of accounts working, and we have covered a good deal of kind of error scenarios, error cases. Now, not in this presentation, but very much attached to this is also the sandbox presentation that we're going to be sharing a little bit about later on today. In our last PI, one of the things that we wanted to do was get into a position where the PISP workstream or the PISP would be complete enough, not only from an implementation point of view, actual code working and tests, but also from a communications perspective, from a use case guides, from an API documentation perspective, that we could support a fintech-focused PISP hackathon. And I'm going to be sharing a little bit about some of our efforts in that later on today in the sandbox presentation. But I guess, yeah, coming to what we've gotten done in this PI, I've got this dashboard here that we've been working on for Product Council and helping us kind of give a one-page view of where we're at. And this is kind of my report out version of that. So I've modified a couple of things. Our 4 main objectives on the top right here were implement V1 of the PISP functionality with our tests, with our Happy Path demo, and good example code that someone could take and look at and implement this themselves. Also, to implement that demo and prepare for a PISP webinar, that was an objective that kind of got added later on, but we successfully completed both of those two objectives. Now, I made it very binary. I like to always hedge around saying, oh, we almost did this, we almost did that. But if we look at it from a very purely binary perspective, did we do this or not do this? We did not submit the complete draft of the third-party API to the CCP. And we didn't get user guides and documentation for 2 use cases. Our initial objective for the PI was actually to deliver 4 use cases and user guides documentation for 4 different use cases. So a use case being like a peer-to-peer is our first use case, which is kind of the simple one, but looking at perhaps how do you use the 3PPI API to do things like FX, or how to use the API to do bulk, maybe bulk G2P payments, for example. Those are some examples of use cases that we're ruminating on. So we haven't completed those 2 things. I think I'll talk about that a little bit more in the next section. I'm just seeing if there's anything else on this slide I need to look at. That said, the CCB is mostly happy with our proposal. We need to tidy up a few things and really just go ahead and finish submitting it. I'll run out of time to do that with our resources. And we haven't yet supported a fintech-focused hackathon. That was kind of one way that we were going to define our success. But we have the target event, which is great, which is for the Monetary Authority of Singapore has joined the foundation, and they've got us involved in a CDBC hackathon, where Mojaloop is one of the technologies that they're going to be that participants come and use and test out to see if they can use it. There's a bunch of like different what's problem statements that participants need to solve, and we're hoping that Mojaloop can plug some gaps in kind of last mile delivery of transfers into real payment networks. So I don't want to go too much into detail. Leslie can correct everything I just said that was wrong in a second. So bottom right, maybe just looking at health. There's work to be done here, and that's on our roadmap that we're going to talk about around getting everything committed back upstream and the tests merged in with mainstream Mojaloop to make sure that when you deploy Mojaloop, you can either flick the switch to say, yes, I want PISP functionality, or no, I don't want it, and everything should work. We don't have that ability today. We have the ability to deploy PISP as a part of a sandbox environment. That's kind of essentially just band-aided and sticky taped together. So we need to harden that and make it ready to be more publicly available than it is today. So like I said, our objectives, I'd say we got a 2 out of 4 in terms of if it's just pass fail. I kind of have already talked about this. We've completed one use case, kind of jumping to the last point. I think I've talked through all these already, but we've completed one use case here in support of the hackathon. We're working on the second. We've had to reduce the scope based on the resources that we had available. So that's our report out for this PI. I'll be interested to see, I'm not following the chat, but hopefully someone else is, and I can kind of catch up with that one later on as we go. I'm also expecting that we might have time, a good amount of time for discussion at the end of this. So hopefully that is the case. So really, I don't have a demo to show you guys today because I think we've used our demo a lot. Really today is just about checking in to say, hey, here's the progress, here's where we're at, and here's where we're going next. And this is our roadmap proposal for the next PI. Should that say PI 15, not 16? I think it should. I always get confused because we're at the end of a PI and then we're at the, anyway. Really, as I've been
15.
kind of, okay, PI 15, okay, my bad. Really, the 4 things that we see as kind of prime candidates for this next PI is really around getting ready for production. It's doing a bunch of the security hardening and validation, performance testing, and having a baseline for PISP. Like we can't currently answer the question, how much does PISP slow down a transaction? Or how if your TPS for your normal peer-to-peer transaction in a or transfer, I should say, in Mojaloop is X, how much slower is it going to be when you add all the PISP stuff in as well? And those are things that will need to be answered before we, well, that someone will want to be answered when they want to go live with PISP. As I said, PISP, we want that to be enabled and committed back upstream to the Mojaloop Helm releases. And that's actually not too hard a task, but really the difficult thing is getting it embedded into the QA processes. So how does it get adopted in such a way that it becomes just a normal part of deploying and testing Mojaloop and the normal release cycle that we have? There's work to be done, and I've kind of put it in point number 1 as well, but really in our documentation and integration guides. So we need a document that shows a DFSP coming to the table. How do I make this from scratch? How do I, or a PISP, how do I go ahead and integrate with the PISP APIs? What are the different options available to me? And what are the use cases that's going to enable? And that kind of speaks to point number 4 here. There's other opportunities we see around, if we have the resources, I always put these here just to kind of keep people thinking, you know, if we've got enough people to work on it, these are the stuff that we can also get done. I think this one here, merchant request to pay scenario as well, integrating in with other elements of Mojaloop and supporting other use cases will be really important. But I think, yeah, there's always that. I think there's a balance that we need to take as a work stream, and this is where I think if we end up doing a breakout session tomorrow for PISP is focusing on how do we get everything that we want in the right time frame. We want to be able to go live production ready for a peer-to-peer version of PISP, but if someone else in the community says, actually, well, we only really see this working in a merchant scenario, so we'd rather prioritize getting merchants working in PISP, or I don't know. This is where it's up to you, the community, to really jump in and help out and help guide the roadmap for the PISP work. What we want to be able to do, I think in this PI, we've got us mostly to the point where we can run a hackathon, and I'll talk more about that in a later presentation, but really we're 1 month away from having a hackathon with the Monetary Authority of Singapore, and we're going to be ready enough have something for the participants to work against. We're working on use case guides. We're working on deploying our APIs in a way in a public sandbox that people can use, and that includes the PISP APIs. Now, that's a lot of hand-holding. We talked about this in the last PI meeting. Was that requires us to kind of set up a lot of things and hold someone's hand and walk through that process with them to get an environment like that up and running. Now, what we would love to get to is a place where we can just kind of have a bundle of resources, have a whole bunch of things that automated scripts to set everything up, and enough tooling out there that we could just hand a bundle of resources to someone, give them a 3-hour video call or whatever, and they can have enough to set up their own hackathon event. So that's kind of the success metric of being able to run a hackathon with minimal support. So we've got enough work done in our integration guides. We've got enough work done in the hardening of the environment that it's reliable. We've got enough work done in our use case guides that someone can come along and read a use case guide and go, oh, that inspires me to implement this type of idea. Or I can look at this API guide, this usage guide, and go, oh, those are the different API calls I need to make this thing real. And really, I think the golden thing here, this is what we're all working towards, is a pilot. Like, we need to see PISP real. And I know that there's a few different people out there in the community that are keen to make this real and deploy it live in the market. So we want to see that happen. I don't know if that's going to be this PI, but we're gonna do everything we can with your support to make that happen. How are we doing for time? I think we're doing quite well. I've only been rambling for 15 minutes. So I actually don't have too much more to talk about today. I think the question that I kind of went for a nice walk today, and I've been thinking about over the last few days, is when does the PISP workstream end? I think based on our current roadmap, depending on if we have enough resources, we could complete a V1 of PISP with basic peer-to-peer transfers working, API properly adopted and implemented. We've got use case guides, we've got integration guides, we've got everything working. We could imagine a world in 3 months' time where the PISP workstream might not be needed anymore in its current sense, where we could be moving just into maintenance mode of these set of features, and that could potentially be handled by the core team. Now, the question is, what's next with the PISP workstream? Thinking beyond this 3-month mark, thinking beyond a world where this is all integrated in with all of the main modular code base. So I think that's where coming to this question about what is the scope going forward of the workstream? Could it be expanded into looking at other overlay services, other use cases? As example for PISP, there's been discussion of a few use cases already. Could this workstream focus more to bringing PISP to market and providing resources and support for people doing that in production environments? Could we close down the workstream and call it done? Okay, put a stamp on it, we're happy with it. I know that's in our agile world, no job is ever finished, but at some point we have to ship something. And I'm hoping, I see that we're getting quite close to that point. And could the maintenance for this code hopefully be maintained by the community in an ongoing sort of status? So this is an open question. I don't know. I've just been thinking kind of thinking about how does this fit in with the broader mission of the community? And we spun up this work stream to get a whole lot of this stuff done. We've done most of it, and now it's kind of we got to figure out, I guess, where we're going and how to make that real in a market. So Leslie, I'm sure you've got thoughts.
Let's watch this space, Lewis. I'm absolutely.
Yeah.
So for me, this is fundamentally in our product framework, which you'll hear me talk about a lot more in tomorrow's session. But we've got a framework now of how work streams and product fit together. And is a work stream a project, or is it a product element? That's still TBD. But what I have as a product framework is core modulate plus optional extensions. And we now have this concept of modular and extensible. So 3PPI as an API set will always be a choice for a scheme to adopt or not. It's always going to be an optional extension, just like the merchant extensions we talked about, just like the bulk extensions we talked about, just like the scheduling extensions we talk about in reference architecture. So the concept of what is core is a big part of what Product Council are looking after. And it's not about a core team owns the whole product. All the work streams own the product. We're a team together, a system together.
Yeah.
But the one thing that I can say is we're never done. We know we work agile and feedback improves products, just like we saw in all the other work streams this thing. So what we absolutely need to do is get to market with a market that is sufficiently friendly, that understands this is a beta of our blueprint and wants to be the lead market for making it better. So what we did this quarter was a 3PPI webinar to launch to the world that we are ready. We have this thing. We believe it serves financial inclusion. Here's why. And here are some use cases and implementation guides that we can do. I don't know if all of you saw that webinar. It's recorded. We can send the URL into Pathable. But fundamentally, the story never ends here. We will continue to improve this as a modular extension to our core product, but we must do it hand in hand with the right partner adopter. There are 3 to 4 candidates in our adopter list at the moment with multiple use cases in mind, actually. And it's actually worth saying that one of the first things that Lewis and I are working on together, we're obviously putting the P2P story with Fido into our sandbox. Lewis will talk to you about that later on tomorrow. But what we're also doing is taking some of the ideas that we had from 2 or 3 events back, where I think it was Adrian who presented, we could use 3PPI for some of our cross-network FXP considerations, maybe even Michael or Adrian, one or the other. We could use it for connection to legacy systems. Those kind of use cases will also serve financial inclusion, but it's not about the customer having a smartphone. So what we're doing in the Apex story, as one of our first kind of tests of this in a safe sandbox hackathon style environment, is surfacing an API to be used for G2P use case. We're expecting and hoping that some of the participants at their event, which it's not our event, it's their event, it's about retail CBDC, that they'll want to land money in last mile networks. And as a consequence, they may have payroll software, or they may have CBDC management software, treasury, whatever. And at some point, they want to land it into a mobile money account or into an MFI or into a SACO or last mile, where the customer has choice and says, pay me to this account. So we're supplying a 3PPI API for this purpose, for the inject transactions into my network, please use case, which I think I'm quite excited as might be one of the first solid use cases that we're able to say works for cross-border remittance, networks of networks and all sorts. But the big questions that I'm asking myself and I'm asking Lewis, where's Fido in this story and how does authentication work in this particular scenario? So that's where we're going to do some work and get far enough with the sandbox and the hackathon, learn from that and hopefully bring some more back. But I would say the team size right now, it's Lewis and Leslie Ann. We absolutely need people to care about how do we get 3PPI to a level where it's first level citizen in our GitHub repository, comes out of the box as a modular extension component for anyone who's looking at GitHub independently of the projects that we know about. And how do we get it into our playbooks as this is how you should use it. But most importantly to me, I think what we haven't de-risked, and product management is all about managing risk and de-risk and things in some regards. How do we get it adopted? Because DFSPs have work to do to have the right controls around authentication. They have to be able in their systems to trust the FIDO authentication. Will they? What else will they check? What are our recommendations? What are our best practices? And where's our exemplar where we show them this is what we think goods looks like? For example, by working with Mambu, with working with one of the other platforms that we know are friends of ours, like MyFOS, how do we show the way? How do we build this kind of exemplar behavioral, this is what good looks like if you run this kind of platform at the DFSP and interact as a system with others in your network? I think we've got a long way to go and we need more than just technologists, just people who want to write code. We need to start to build these assets. and we need to take the story to market in a really coherent way. So that would be my call to the community.
Yeah.
Come join us. And if you believe that this the slide that I often show in the 3PPI webinar and things, like we've got this new participant at the table, the fintech, that now no longer has to reinvent stored funds value the way that they currently have to do, because there's suddenly a way for them to manage their money as a first-class participant, manage the money of their customers without having to hold the money. That is brand new and quite exciting, but we won't get to market unless we figure out how to unlock. We have some tech through to a real market deploy and some feedback loops going, like we heard from FitsaWorks today. I think it's super exciting. I think it's very much on trend with what's happening in the world of open banking on top of real-time push payment rails. We're not the only ones thinking about this, but we're probably the only ones with an open source implementation. And I think that's super exciting.
Yeah. Cool. Thanks, Leslie Ann. I knew you'd just fill the gaps that I missed. Much appreciated.
We have two different perspectives of our team. And I think that's the beauty of this, right? Modulip as a community, technology is about a mix of business and tech, and the magic happens when business and tech comes together and works as a team. And that's what my vision is for what our community can be.
Yeah, certainly. I just to kind of close this out, I don't really have much more to say. I have a slide here from last time, 2 slides about community asks, and these things haven't changed. We need help in all of these things. Maybe actually not the second point, integration work to be done. That's been done now. But we need help, as Leslie Ann's saying, from the business side. We need help writing user guides, documentation. We need feedback. We need help testing all these sorts of things. And we also need people to come with their creative use cases to kind of, as Leslie Ann's saying, feed back to us so we can plan the next version, plan what does V2.0 of PISP look like, and what would actually work in the market, because that's certainly my blind spot. I know Leslie Ann has her ear much more to the ground, and there's much more smarter people in the community than I do, but I guess it's all about leveraging that together as a team. I think.
So I'm going to go across the chat and see if we can find out some questions. It's
sure.
having these
Actually,
multiple windows to manage.
A few questions. Yeah, I've given up. I do just want to say thank you to our team, especially Kevin, Sridhar, and Pavel, who have done most of the development work on the PISP stuff. They've been a pleasure to work with, and yeah, they've really powered on through many uncertain moments, uncertain design moments. So thanks, guys. Yeah, so please, Leslie Ann, I'm gonna switch over to Pathable as well and have a look around, see if I can see anything. But apart from that, that's it for me, presentation wise.
Great. So listen, I've got a couple quick tee-ups while you're getting settled over there in Pathable to have a look for questions. The first is that it seems to me that we do have a call for participation here in ways more than simply coming in to hack on the code. I would say that one of the initial things that would be very helpful is an MTP training module. That's the Modulip training program training module. And if this could be something that wasn't done by one person sitting in front of a webcam, but could actually be done by 2 or 3 folks, there'd be one benefit from that, which is to do a training program, you have to really wallow in the thing and really understand it. And be able to explain it to others requires a deeper level of understanding. And what often happens is while you're trying to do that documentation, you say, oops, I found something that actually needs more attention in the code itself or documentation, or there's something that needs to be on the roadmap for improvement at some future point. So I think there's a level of contribution that it doesn't require you to be a rock star developer, but it does require you to have a business understanding or develop one of what this PISP functionality is good for, what it could be good for. I think Leslie Ann's pointing out that now that you guys have it, gosh, maybe it could be used for inter-scheme connection. We're not sure. We didn't know that before. We were thinking
we're going to try
narrowly for some other purposes. So I would really encourage maybe 2 or 3 people who have at least a passing interest in using PISP or how it might work for fintechs. to get involved in helping us build the MTP modules to explain what this is. That would allow the community to become more involved in a way that is more than simply developing code.
What I'm also doing with Lewis, you'll hear this more in the sandbox track, but we're also doing a show don't tell. We're trying to be a little bit more Stripe and show developers the way around. So we need training to help hub operators get this up and running and think about DFSP connections and things, but we also need to think about showing the way on Stripe style simplicity on how to use the API. And we think that probably we'll do that by show by example through the sandbox process. So there's a backlog of work that Lewis is managing with me around how do we do that show don't tell, and that will come through, I think, in the other presentation that Lewis is doing too. It's fundamental to this.
I've been trying to tease that a little bit.
Yeah, and with regard to the training program, Miller, it is on the roadmap. What we need is a champion. And if there's folks on the call today that are interested in possibly learning more about what would it be entailed, we have a very easy to use platform for developing the training modules. So if you want more information, reach out to myself and I'll introduce you to Amanda Bryan, who's working with the training program coordinators, and we can walk you through what would be required because it is on the roadmap. We need a champion to lead the effort. Actually,
I think it comes with as a sequence into this, to be honest. And we haven't yet put it in GitHub. That's the priority. Because no one's going to take it then. Then we have to actually get it live in a market because we're learning what the right training is by doing in a real market. And when we do, and we think, and we're very carefully thinking about how to train for future by learning with real people on the ground, what the questions are they ask and how it works, we'll build a better training program. So there is a moment of us marketing via demos and developer portal, getting it in GitHub, getting our first adopter, and then getting the best training program we can based on learning in the field. That's what I think the sequence is.
Right. We just need to clone Lewis.
Cool.
20 Lewis's, please.
I think that would, I don't know, how would I figure out which one's the real me? That would be my main concern.
So look, when we first launched this back, maybe 6 months ago, we were talking about it. There were some awesome people from the UK open banking world who came to see our presentation and went, wow, that's such a good idea. So what we need to figure out as a community is how do we harness open banking professionals who think it's a really good idea, but aren't necessarily going to launch it for us in an emerging market? How do we start to break the problem down such that we get contribution from those who really do believe in open banking and PISP enablement and have experience of doing it well? Plus, then how do we get it into market and how do we do these things well? So it's a lot for us to think about, but the community already has people very interested in the mission, and as a consequence, how do we figure out the right contribution model? Will be super interesting.
So one final ask then that builds on that, Leslie, and I think is that there's some polish that will be needed here. We're talking about closing off the work stream to a real true V1. The training program is something that is somewhat independent of that, but I still think super important because it allows people to wallow in it, figure out how it works. But there are things like documentation. You mentioned cleaning it up to get the repositories cleaned up. Another thing is to be sure that the documentation and supporting materials are using our native formats. There's a lot of material, I think, floating around in Open Docs or Google Docs. We need to get that off of that and get it into Markdown and into our GitHub repositories and our standard formats. And I think then, it's actually engaging with the hackathons, either doing one ourselves or engaging with those that are ongoing. And I think this may, you touched on it, but I think it's a really important point, so I'm going to reinforce it. This PISP function is the way in which a fintech that is not an account holding institution can interact directly with Mojaloop. This has been something that at every hackathon we see. I love the idea of Mojaloop. Who's going to deploy it for me so that I can use it? And how do I connect to it? And there hasn't been a good answer for that other than talk to your financial institution and encourage them to allow you to connect. This is a way for you to connect directly. And it is a sense of autonomy, I think, for fintechs that they would be missing. And the alternative is they have to go get a banking license, or they have to somehow become directly involved in the financial transactions where that's not necessarily their core business. So this is a way of expanding out that. And I think that was a very good point. I'm very glad you brought that up.
And it's how we talked about it at the webinar, actually. The webinar that we did for the launch, we thought quite hard about what's our financial inclusion mission and how do we bring these to the loop. But I'm also quite keen to see how do we get contribution and feedback loops through this concept of hackathons. So we mentioned the Apex platform, and what we've been doing is doing MVP style developer portal work with Lewis to make it ready for external people who know nothing about us to understand how to do some stuff with this. And we'll get some feedback loops via that. But also, we're hopefully working with DFS Labs around a merchant style concept where there will be multiple APIs at the table, 3PPI, but also hopefully by then things like merchant request to pay, pay me, the kind of things that we have at the table. And
that's great.
We really want to get the fintechs involved. If we get African fintechs, emerging markets fintechs engaged with why it's important for them to contribute to making this better, I think potentially they will see benefits from it faster than.
And I would definitely encourage a discussion maybe during this week with Innocent Koya from who is probably on the call, or if not, he will be lurking somewhere here this week. From Uganda, who runs, as you all know, runs Hypipo and the wonderful Include Everyone initiative. And also Jake Kendall and company over at DFS Lab.
We are.
And because that's really the way in which we're doing outreach to those communities to see what do they want to use this stuff for, and how can it drive our transition into that.
And it's fundamentally why I've been pushing so hard for our sandbox strategy. Show, don't tell. The moment we have a way to help these events, these people who run these events with a standardized set of this is modular, this is what it works, this is how it works out of the box, the more we'll be able to do more of this kind of way to grow our community. So actually, Lewis is the center of the sandbox world too. So
well, thank you both. That's great. Really good to see all of this.
Yeah, cool. Thanks, Miller.
Anybody else got any questions going on in Pathable? I just have a quick look. So I can't see many people posting in there anything. But fundamentally, Michael, if we get the cost rights, fintech should be able to pay account holding institutions to join the fintech scheme. Maybe.
It's upside down world. Cool. I think that's all I've got. Yeah, Leslie Ann, anything else from your side?
I think we've covered what we've done this quarter. I'm excited to see that sandbox. Actually, there's a big one, actually. Our sandbox is now at sandbox.moduloop.io. And you will literally see Lewis's work over the next PI, iterations of that getting better by September. Just to put Lewis on the spot.
Yeah.
We need
if there's broken
feedback.
links, don't tell me because I know that they're broken. that's my only.
We actually need review feedback there, and it's got 3PPI coming in there as a core proposition. So that's where you'll find out now about 3PPI before there is any training programs, and before there's good GitHub content on how it works and all those kind of things. That is where you'll find information today, mostly focused at a fintech audience rather than a hub operator audience, mostly focused at people using the API.
Yeah, cool. All
awesome.
right, thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Lewis and Leslie Ann. So we will end the session early. The next item on the agenda, I believe, is an update from the core team that starts at 1 p.m. UTC. That will be led by Sam. I see Sam. I see Vijay, Godfrey, Miguel, and Valentin Genev. So why don't we take this opportunity to take a 20-minute break, and then we'll resume at the top of the hour and for the core team presentation. Thank you so much, everybody.